Good. Hello. Welcome. Another Friday here. Samahita. And at this time of day, it is, I'm looking out to the water, is exceptionally still and calm. Yet a few hours ago, it was stormier with heavier rain. And before that, stronger sun. And that's all just in the last few hours while we're here. Yet we reach a point where it looks like there was no disturbance ever. So of course our own inner mental state, what happens with practice, tends to go through certain cycles. We're all looking for the calm state, the nice state. But we have to know what to do with a calm state, see? Being calm is nice, right? But in and of itself, it doesn't bolster resilience, doesn't build strength, doesn't add to robustness, may not help you in other situations. So when things get a little bit difficult or tricky, things do get stirred up. Having the, you could say, the recollection of that calm state where you would be present, clear, can see things, understand things, that recollection brought into a more turbulent state is where these work together. And of course it's in when the turbulent state, when things are stirred up, that there's the opportunity for growth actually. And perhaps it's a cycle of certain activity, disturbance, space, calm, and that cycle has its time period. Depends how you handle it in your own life and which way you approach practice. But in that time period, one comes to understand what this calm state is. I personally can enjoy quiet, calm, that's good, right? But quiet, calm state of mind is like a prerequisite to go deeper in practice, see? So it's sort of reaching a point, and I can bring that into interaction in a relationship, focus, work, whatever it might be. But then when you take that into practice, you don't have any energy expended in unnecessary other physiological activities, other psychological concerns. So this calm state, which many people I'm happy to enjoy, if you get stuck there, then there's no further growth. So the calm state is an opportunity. It's like very calmly coming home, happy to be in a quiet, calm house. And then you say, right, now I will start to, from this calm place, unpack, pull out all that's in the closet. Because I know that closet, that basement, that attic, that room, whatever it is, needs to be cleared out. So from this calm state, we do have the opportunity for deeper psychic clearing. And that's why some of these practices might help the physiology that supports that calmness, and you can enjoy that psychologically. But then we have these other routines, and some of them I've done with you here, thanks, forgive, help, for instance. On the surface, only done on the surface, that's just nice. And I feel better, maybe. But it should go in and almost disturb for a while, especially in the forgiveness side, and till there's no disturbance, and you can see what it is, and you process through that. But that's like you going home to the house and clearing out a couple of rooms, or an attic, or a basement. And similarly, with the work with the energetic circles, if you like, other language, people like to talk about chakra focus, etc. Now this is channeled, constructive, productive work in a state of calm. See? It's directed. So it's almost like you're taking the kinetic energy that's here, and now you're directing it. Because that state of calm, no matter what, will change, and then something will disturb you later, and you might have an eruption, or an anger response, or frustration, and then you will lament the loss of your calm state, and wish you were back there. You see? And now there hasn't really been much growth. You've just gone from things in life disturbed, okay, you feel a bit better, okay, you're calm, other things disturbed, and you're on that flat plane, that circle. So, value, enjoy, cherish the inner peace, the calmness. I mean, ultimately, again, I come back to the words I use of centeredness, right? But that will imply a physiological robustness that supports that. So that takes, or is carried with you into other difficult settings when you'll get disturbed by outer phenomena or other people or situations or government shutdowns or economic crises or all these other concerns, or the upset partner, the other issues going on in the house, apartment, etc. See? So, and of course it's not a process solved in a day or a week or a month of practice, so hence we're back to make it regular. Make it regular. It's not actually yoga practice if it's not regular. Maybe contemplate that for the week. We have got these statistical polls that talk about 20 million people doing yoga. First of all, what is that yoga? Secondly, how are they doing it? What are they doing? How regularly, etc. So if I was to refine that a bit further and put it under a proper definition of a comprehensive yoga approach, it is part and parcel, it's included in that explanation, regularity. See? So look at that for yourself. Whatever about the other 20 million. What is my relationship with this? What is my approach? Speaking of relationships, you might be seeing somebody here and there, on and off. You kind of feel you're not in something, but somebody's around, you see? So only when it becomes regular, only when it becomes committed, might you then call them, your partner, more than just casual acquaintance lover, but a partner to a even a marriage partner, etc. Because it's taken a different commitment and regularity in the relationship, and of course that brings its own set of difficulties, but it's major benefits and bonuses too. And this is the relationship with yourself via a medium of practice. And practice, often when I say yoga practice, people go, oh yeah, I did my practice, and they recount a asana, usually quite on the more physical activity level, asana, pose and flow, as a practice. And not that it's not entirely, but that in and of itself, and only that, and done in a more predominant physical activity level, doesn't fully qualify either under what we would really describe as yoga practice. So it's the content, the regularity, and your ability to become equanimous, or able to see and understand. So that's back to my earlier point, that you could take the learned quality of that calmness, spaciousness, ability to see things, take that into the other situations. And that is applied in practice and outside of practice. And as one of the questions we'll get at in a little bit, it was more or less asking around and referring to this. So if there's anything to take from that, it's there will naturally be periods of calm and quiet in your life, and maybe you've times in the day where you get that after kids are in bed or just at night, first thing in the morning, whatever it is. You know, enjoy them, but also take them as a deeper learned experience, so it becomes part of your own psyche, and you can use that time to go in and clear up that psyche. Okay. Then what will happen is you are centered. That's really the outcome from yoga. That's a word, Samahita, and it comes up in the 4th chapter of the Yoga Sutra. That you kind of have that whoom, see? Mindfulness is just one element of that. Total balance, groundedness, understanding. It doesn't mean you're robotic, responding, oh, it's okay. You know, no, you've got life in you, right? But inside, your physiology does not get disturbed beyond that range that keeps you in balance, see? So you might see me get animated and maybe strongly emphasize a point or explain something, and somebody who's less understanding or feels sensitive will say, oh, you're angry. And the response would be that what you're describing in an external way is not what is processing inside. Because if that was, it would literally change things biochemically, and there would be a different output anyway. So you can avoid that. It's hard to like completely force that, but you can avoid that because your system is trained and developed over time, conditioned to remove, to you could say not respond at a deeper psychic level to all that frustration and disappointment and other things. And that's really where the balanced, it's not a good word, but it's used a lot to explain it, you know, non-attached, because you're going to be attached no matter what to certain things, but definitely non-dependent. So we'll take apart those points after a little bit of practice. And today, a little bit of practice, let's say, 5-7 minutes to just enjoy sitting still and calm. And in a way, this is pranayama. Many studies I read or other people's accounts, and you hear pranayama, yogic breathing. I've never liked such a description. It sounds a bit weird, yogic breathing, right? And I know the attempt is to differentiate it from other forms of breathing or breathing exercise, but it fails to emphasize that point. So, ironically, pranayama actually means no breath. So, with everybody saying yogic breathing, they should actually be saying, oh, pranayama is no breathing. And of course, how long you can do that is the challenge or even the impossibility. So one way is the way we pick up in our Hatha yoga practice of, okay, do this breath, go that nostril, this tongue, this sound, and so on. And the other way, which you can definitely see Patanjali was getting at, is pranayama is the space between the inhale and the exhale. Maybe it happened in a forced way, maybe it just happens. Now, what we will, and one of our earlier meditation techniques that we looked at in one of these sessions a few weeks ago, was to just get still and to start being with the space between the inhale and exhale. Okay? So that's pranayama, that's no breath, that's finding that. It might only last for a couple of seconds each one, but it also means your inhale and exhale have diminished. Okay? So have a good seat. I'm leaning against the cushion, but I know my lower spine is supported. I'm not doing full-on active breathing, so this is actually quite comfortable. Place your hands. If you like to close your eyes, go ahead. Check in on your face. Feel it relaxed around the forehead, the temples, around the eyes, cheeks, across the lips now, inside the mouth. How the tongue releases through the throat, into the heart. Shoulders, of course, are relaxed with that. Upper abdomen. So then you have no tension, no restriction on the respiratory function, mainly with the diaphragm. And so you let yourself relax, but as you get to the navel, below it, notice, okay, that's also soft, relaxed. But I can see that my pelvic floor, through my sacrum, through the base of the lumbar spine, is not collapsed. Though I'm in a very passive state, so I'm actually not engaging the lower abdomen in this case. If I have to correct my posture, I will engage it. I'll pull it in, lift me up, shuffle, and then while keeping that support, sacrum to lumbar, I'll return everything to a relaxed state. The last thing that's releasing and letting go is my navel, lower abdomen. So what you have now, ideally, is just passive breathing. Can you watch the breath without participating? Now, the more you do this, remember, regularity is key. So even if you, either before you might do some pranayama exercises, or after, or even both, a few minutes. Sit, be, watch. There is no thinking. See? Ultimate pranayama, no breathing, no thinking. But there is definitely at this stage, this level, paying attention. You're paying attention to the ebb and flow, the in and out. And in between them is where your interest goes. And you now are smart, wise enough to know, don't mess with the breath. Don't mess with the physical function. Don't mess with this phenomena of life. Instead, what's in between? What's in the space? Where's the nothing? And though your body, to keep itself alive in this world, will trigger an inhale, and it'll trigger the exhale. And if you're getting excited, tuned in to the space between breaths, don't be upset or put off, let's just say, by, oh, there's another inhale, oh, and the exhale. Just watch it. And maybe you're able to watch even more, you're able to be with even more. That space starts to settle calmly between the inhale and the exhale, and between the exhale and the inhale. Let's do that now for a few minutes together. There's nothing else to pay attention to, nothing else to be involved in, but right now, in this, between your breaths, between the flow of the breath, in the no breath, in nothing, in who you really are. Just being in this is already the way of practice. But do notice what's passing through your mind. Do not identify with anything coming up on the mind screen, the form of thoughts, visuals. There's nothing to do with you per se. Just like sitting here, there's sounds, there's creatures, there's stuff that moves past me. Why do I need to associate, get caught up in that? On a subtle level, it's at the thoughts and visuals that arise. Your interest is still what's between these elements, the flow of the breath, what's between, what's in that space. reached a point where you're calm, clear, which you might even call centered, know this state. You know what it feels like. Now you could be in it or return to it. And you'll use that when other situations get disturbing or challenging. Pause with the breath. Tap into this known and experienced state. It's within you. And let that be the base as you deal with whatever is the issue going on at the time. And then when you come back to this on a regular basis, part of your practice, and let's say you just decide to do energy circles, chakras, movements, thanks, forgive, help, whatever else, mantra. Get this as your base, and then go deeper. And in and of itself, it's also a practice because you drop all that. People actually want to drop it before they start it. But trust me, the other elements are very effective and they're needed. It's clearing out the rooms, the closet, the attic, the basement. Because when you have done that and you return to this, you are in a different state. Deeper experience of it. So consider it a process that requires regularity. Now you can just kind of loosen your mouth, loosen your shoulders, have a breath. Good. And when you do practices like that, we are withdrawing from the phenomena, the elements of the world, life. So you get very channeled, internalized. And then coming back, of course, you have the adaptability to immediately respond and get back to whatever's needed. But typically that's not needed and that's not the case. So, there's a transition period where you come out of these, which is why it's often advised, look, if you're genuinely practicing, like we do in there in the room, some of these breath courses, even the asana stuff, you come out, you're in your own space, you're slowly getting back to the phenomena. And for some, of course, it's very sensitive and, they need a bit more time, etc. But for us all, ideally, it's just the acknowledgement of what was experienced and nurturing it still. Why do I need to rush into blah, 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 action, action, action? Unless there's a direct need, like a child needs it or something like that, okay? So I hope all that makes sense. And actually, anybody who's been here, you might have seen this painting behind me. And in some sense, more or less, it gets at what I've just been describing. And this is part of a translational model I developed myself through the studies and work. But really, what's the degree of conflict? The more inner peace or disharmony? And the different things you'll work on. Where's your mind at? More pulled outside, or are you able to internalize? And really, what happens in that process is my translation for cliche is distortion of self. us as greedy, selfish, overly self-involved, aversive, prejudiced, fearful, how much of that dominates us or little. Of course, the more internal I go, the less it dominates. Because I've worked on it. How do you work on it? You practice regularly. That isn't just limited to, back on the mat, arms up, inhale. That's can be an important piece, but one piece that's really just base foundational. So get into this mental aspect, I have a little friend, a little mosquito that wants to join me here. Anyway, let's get to some of your questions. What do I have here now? So what could be the most important question that has been asked? Could be. It says, is one piece of dark chocolate the same as a bar of chocolate? Very important question, actually. And the answer is the opposite. Know your chocolates, young man. Regular chocolate, all you have to do is look at the ingredients, and it's actually a bar of sugar with a few other things. So I'll quote, many people like to quote from text, but I'll quote from popular culture, a song, Beastie Boys song, that goes, I like my sugar with coffee and cream. That's often how people eat chocolate. I like my sugar with dab of cocoa and a bunch of other chemicals. So the thing about dark chocolate, of course, for a connoisseur, is the beneficial effects of cocoa, which are really good for your bodily health, let's say, can only be got when the percentage is high enough. 70% is good, but really you want to be at 80-85%. And then if you really take a look, it's minimal sugar, right? So actually, you could have a bar of dark chocolate and it might have less sugar than one or two chunks of the other chocolate. So that's why I say it's the other way around. But thanks for that important question. So, there were some things also following on from last week. And this is what I was sort of wrapping up on, and I'll continue now. It was hoping to get at the difference in what is, I suppose, a breath construction and what is the meaning of prana. So as we know, the construction of spirit is abstract. The construction of body is not abstract. It depends who you're talking to. A materialist scientist would agree with that. Someone who's maybe looks at non-duality, the spiritual aspect of life, would say it's almost the opposite. Because there's nothing permanent, fixed or set about what you're calling my abstract physical body. Yeah. Of course, my perception of things through sensory and other inputs, which can be sensory input, interoception, or even the proprioception, right? So the way I pick up information will tell me, oh no, this is abstract, this is here. But in reality, it's not. The practice we just did, looking between the breath, because that inhale kept going, that exhale kept going. What was real? What was stable? Right? And so we were aiming to get at the space in between, okay? And there you were finding something that's actually more genuine, more real, experiencing it. And it's tricky, because you slip either way into the ups and downs of phenomena, which we then like to term as abstract and this body and so on. Now, of course, if I have to explain certain practices and the effect on the body and health, then I have to use that language. But I'll die just having used that language and figured out nothing. And though, especially with Hatha Yoga, they use the understanding of the body, particularly physiology, that's not what it's about. Understand that to more clearly or more directly experience what's between those inhales and exhales, right? What's deep in your heart. So, the breath can be measured by lung capacity and so on, but how about prana construction? How can that be clarified scientifically? So, fair question, and to be honest, it hasn't been. There are people who kind of, believe in esoteric stuff that try to put scientific language on it, but that doesn't mean that it's been clarified and solved, right? Whereas and the difficulty is getting a proper definition. So really the word prana, as used definitely by Patanjali in the Yoga Sutra, is referring to a very grounded concept, as per your question, the breath. That's what it is, prana, the breath. And there are later texts, especially when you get up to things like Vishishta, Samahita and so on, that have a reference to prana in that more esoteric sense, energy of life. But this now we're getting back into what you might call the tantric, the Hatha Yoga territory. And then if you wanted me to explain that further, I would say, well, really that prana then is referring more to physiology. You might even call it psychophysiology as such, okay? How that is and behaves. So we have some measures of psychophysiology, but it still doesn't explain, let's say, the spiritual process or anything like that. I hope, that's a big part of my work over the next 30 years, and it'll take time. And one of the best things we can work with now is probably way more refined EEG as such, reading of brain waves, etc. But on another level, if you really want to go prana and esoteric on it, well, you could say the physical is connected to the spiritual subtle, but then the actual spiritual quality is not seen or measured, and definitely not in a direct way here in the physical to physiological sense. So, you sitting in a car, right? The state of the car could impact what's going on with you, but to measure the function of the car, the temperature in the car, etc., you don't really get a good reading of you, the passenger in the car, see? So I am the passenger in the car, I want to take care of the car, I want to maybe affect the climate, the humidity inside the car, and how well it runs, see? So in that sense it has an impact on me, and of course I'll leave that car and go on, hopefully having it brought me wherever and on into a new destination. But the outsider is left measuring the state of the car, temperature of the car, functioning of the car, and from there you're trying to draw conclusions of how that passenger was. And that's an analogy to see where you can say research on prana and spirituality is at. It's either hard to get at it with what we are capable of now, and too many draw very fanciful lines. So what I can say is, oh, well, that the body responded better. Our physiology, our brain waves, how they've balanced and managed. So like the body responded better in this setting of the car. Okay, I hope you're following me on that. Luckily this is recorded, so you can listen to it again and again. Okay. So that's the challenge then for someone like me researching this stuff. So we can start with, even if it's psychophysiological, it still is grounded in earthly phenomena. Whereas there's no guarantee all this stuff that we describe as spirit and the prana in an esoteric sense is getting at can be figured out with these earthly phenomena. My experience so far is in the tradition we look through the pulse, and basically you're looking at wavelengths and heart rhythms and basically the changes that you've experienced are reflected through that. Similarly, then, if we put on a very highly sensitive EEG, cap, that's going to read way more centers, areas of the brain. In other words, get a lot more refined reading. Then you're probably getting, I think anyway, from my experience looking at this, both directly as a subject for that, and also as the person trying to read it and look into it and study. I think that might be the closest we would be able to look at prana, so to speak. And then you have to know what you're looking for and what it means. Yeah? And very few do. So what you have is a lot of people saying, oh, my kundalini is awake, oh, my prana is rising, or all this and that. And for sure, something's going on physiologically because they're experiencing some feelings and things in different places and parts of the body and so on. But is that really this kind of description of spiritual growth, energy rising that they state in the texts? My experience is definitely not. It might be a preliminary stage, but again, it can stay as a crazy energy in a preliminary stage, which may not even benefit you. Or through regular practice, regular awareness, tuned in, this changing physiology can be brought to use or help benefit you, right? And so then if you put people under EEG who are claiming all sorts of things, when you really look at the brain waves, or as we do, we look at the pulse, there isn't much. I know you're describing all this moving activity inside, but actually when we look at it, pulse, which is difficult to read, but it has lots of insights in it, or advanced EEG brainwave analysis, you don't see anything that they're hoping is associated with all that moving energy. Now, having said that, there's no point in knocking it and saying it's not right, but rather, have a dose of reality. How are you practicing? How regular is that? Let's keep that going. Let's stay. That is our priority, and not like, wow, this happened, that happened, this moved, that moved, etc. That moved. So I knocked my props on set here. So consider it like that. Anyway, I hope that's kind of clear. The other question that keeps coming up is about this third eye. Been asked it about 5 times now, or as this person has written, 30 eye. 30 eye or third eye? It's pretty impressive. 30 eyes. And the point between the center of the head, floor of brain, blah blah blah. Okay. The problem is this: we have perhaps older, archaic Sanskrit terminology and writing in these texts and they've mainly been translated and interpreted. Even the interpretations that are older have only been translated in the last max 200 years. And what you get is interpretations via translations that are based on limitation of understanding, or the context of socialization of the time. What does that mean? I am a Christian British scholar, and because India is part of the British Empire, I could go to India in like 1880 or 1912 or whatever and get access to certain Sanskrit texts and maybe talk to some Buddhist or Hindu Brahmin pundits and start to get into this. And without maybe a deep initiation in practice, I might just end up with more of intellectualized interpretation. So then I start talking about between the eyebrows, third eye, and then what you have is art, which is, the average art anyway, it was 2D. And so, and then you've got like fake guru, whoever he is, saying fancy things and putting his thumb on you here and so on. See? So, if you focus here, be careful. If you really look at it in terms of body content, it's where the two frontal sinuses join. That just has one cranial nerve input to it and sympathetic nerves, and they're there to allow function of the sinus. And of course, just behind it, past the skull, you're getting into a bit of the frontal part of the prefrontal cortex. And to stimulate here, or you see people breathing and sticking their fingers up and things like that. There's no teaching I've come across that says put your fingers there. That is practice that's focused on the quality of stimulation, excessive breathing, sensitive body point touching, and so on. And that's not necessarily, and I would actually say it's not good for you. One, it leads you astray. Two, if you overstimulate these areas, either through over-breathing, through over-touching, etc., it's more debilitating than supporting. And I've had this experience, not by touching, but through force movement. Be too strong here, go wrong, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. So I can, of course, bring my focus there, but I could bring my focus to the tip of the nose, I could bring my focus to my cheekbone, I could bring my focus to my lower lip. You can do that. That doesn't mean, oh wow, it's some extra special center. And you're caught in a poor interpretation of earlier original teachings, poor translation perhaps, or a lack of deep real understanding because of a lack of real deep experience. And what you perceive as my nose is only about 20% of it, 20-30% of it, right? This whole naval cavity, nasal structure goes massively deep in. And then above it is where, you'll find, if you start to see how the eyes are formed, and then the optic nerve that comes off. And so all of that culminates where you've got, about that point between the eyebrows, but between the upper front corner of the ears above the soft palate. And there is quite a fascinating zone of pituitary gland, optic chiasm, which is technically what between the eyes is, to hypothalamus, floor of brain, and the lateral ventricles that are, in that case, the third ventricle just above, right? Okay, which of course is fluid filled. So you've got this zone that's quite interesting. Now this is the edge of the nose, this is between the eyebrows, and this is where you have cerebrospinal fluid. So you've got the shape of the moon, you've got fluid, you've got pretty much the mother of your autonomic nervous system, the hypothalamus right there. Now I can come back to surface projections anywhere, and just because it was in some book or some person said it, I'm left here, and that's not even it. So go in, have that. And so what I've been trying to say through all these sessions is all those hatha yoga practices focus by the navel. If we're getting into heart stuff, focus on your heart. If we're getting, could even be what we were just doing, watching between the breaths. You can be here. If you're looking into nothing, into space, here. But if you get stuck there, or you did pranayama with your focus here, which is what will happen if you put your fingers there, and then it's cheap stimulation to worse than that. Okay? So, I hope that helps explain it. And maybe I'll be asked it again. But what is the third eye? Well, you start to experience it. Okay? And it's probably a zone of activity there. Because the hypothalamus has neural connections to the pineal. And of course, it's direct neural. All the neural connections in the pituitary are from the hypothalamus. So, that zone, that world. And maybe that is where you could see a pranic function, back to the earlier question. Because, how charged am I? How stressed am I? How much sort of energy, watch my energy level is how I'm watching my pranic level as such, which I can then see through pulse. And even if I'm in a very internalized, subtle state, see that energy is high. The body's balance. That's what Nadi Shodhana is. Balance of functioning. Good base, clarity, calm. Now I can go to another level. And then you would see other brain waves, of course, change, and you'll see different activity around prefrontal, etc. And that might be the best window in on to get a more constructive measure for prana. On my way there, I have visited this three-dimensional plus zone of third eye in there. Okay. Other question was, can I explain the difference between Ujjayi breathing in asana and Ujjayi in pranayama? Thank you. So the word Ujjayi is only referred to Ujjayi pranayama in the text anyway, and in its description, at least in Hatha Pradipika, it doesn't give what we might call introductory or base levels. It just gives you the technique, and it says contraction in the vocal cords around the glottis, right, aklishta, and the breath will come with sound, breathing. Inhale through both, exhale out the left. So that's the description for Ujjayi pranayama. So then what you have are specifics of inhale both nostrils, exhale left, with a contraction of vocal cord muscles, which reduces the size of the glottis, and as a result, a sound. Now people, of course, call that sound and the contraction the Ujjayi. I suppose it's really a debate, because if you can refer to Ujjayi pranayama or the Ujjayi style with breath work, whereby I'm in both nostrils and I'm out both nostrils. And if I'm just into physical benefits of breathing, that's enough, actually. And then, like the text says, I could apply it if I was doing other things. I mean, socially that'll get a bit weird, but it could help you calm down or center yourself a bit in different situations. And then you have definitely from the sort of Krishnamacharya approach, employing that management of breath in the doing of asanas. So we're not going to call it ujjayi breathing in asana, but it might be. It is what is done in ujjayi pranayama. So this is where the debate is. Super technical, okay, there's just ujjayi pranayama, and it tells you to contract, and there's a sound. However, simplified ujjayi pranayama is in and out both nostrils, which is basically just a standard breathing. So now it's a standard breathing with a contraction. So then, Pattabhi Joyce used to say it like breathing with sound. Others just threw out the word ujjayi. So the ujjayi breath approach might be a way to do it, and then you could apply it in asana. It's applied part and parcel of ujjayi pranayama, which gets you out the left, and it's it could be applied in other instances if it came down to it. Let's say I had to run for the plane, and who gets on planes anymore? But anyway, run to the plane, run to the train, whatever it is, sitting down, okay, my breath's a bit labored, a bit heavier, then my breath comes down, I'm starting to relax a bit, I have the thought of there's something I have to prepare, or I'm going into an interview. Maybe I just want to add that in now. And if you could hear that, it's not forced, it's just smooth, and I've contracted a little bit, and it slows down the breath, and it potentially impacts vagal function. Okay? So it's good. Do I do it all the time? No, and I'd be weird if I did, and it would be less effective, and it's unnecessary. But definitely you could employ it in other times, therefore you could employ it in the asana. However, you don't have to employ it in the asana, and there's another way to do asana because different asanas function in different ways. And let's say a inversion, like if I'm in a headstand, that is a pure gravitational pose, pure. And when you have struggled past getting yourself physically set to it, now you're in a balanced position that will waver a little bit here and there, right? But you're in a balanced position where gravity is doing the work. And now you don't need this form of breathing. Okay? In fact, your breath can drop, 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 and then the more your breath drops, the less you would employ this so-called ujjayi contraction in the throat. Think of it like that. So if I'm calm, meditative, it would be counterproductive to do such a thing. Just like the exercise we did in this session. Okay, I hope that helps, that's clear. I know there's some other questions, but we may not get there. Okay, all these questions come in while I'm 2/3 of the way through, so I'll get into them next week. There was one question that came in before, and I'll just get to that now. She says it's a wee question. I was emailed another question about middle fingers. I don't associate anything special with them other than Hatha Yoga Pranayama prescribes drawing down the index in the middle, so you'll use the ring. She was asking, why do I have rings on my middle fingers? Because I like it. And I used to wear a wedding ring, and things like that, right? This measures sleep rhythms, this is family stuff. And sure, you can have hand gestures, mudras, touching things, doing stuff with that, etc. Sometimes people get a bit carried away with that. The main one that's employed in yogic and meditative practices is actually that. It's the main one, it's not the only one. And that's more focusing on the index finger, saying, come down, don't get carried away. How much do you know? Remember? I have a lot to learn. So it's that. And then the index finger, the middle finger in and of itself, other than used as a rude gesture in other worlds, is just part of I don't know, hand structure. If you look at like nervous input and sensory output from the hand, you'll see a kind of a division around there. So it is kind of interesting. Some of it comes down the middle of your middle finger. But personally, I don't really put more attention than that on it. It quite honestly, my powerful practices are sitting internalized with my fingers passive, and only if it's involving a certain pranayama then is it turned in. And then I'm going to use those hands in the spread of the fingers, or that, one of those, in asana. So, hope that helps. Okay, so the last question for now, and I'll get to the others in our next session. This is a wee question. Research on the impact of breath work and pranayama and chronic insomnia. Okay, so that's a long one too. That's next week. This one was asking about why thinking matters. This comes back to my opening discussion as such. And it was something that I guess Richard and Mary were talking about, why thinking matters. Spoke about non-attachment and how yoga enables you to notice the process of ego arising, of ego-motivated action and thought. So what is ego anyway? Have you got a good definition of that? Something to think about. Self-identification is definitely one part of it. And if you associate with that, well then you've got all sorts of issues and problems, and you'll be upset and frustrated and so on. And maybe it's that association that's rising, etc. Because of course it's not who you are. How yoga enables you to notice the process of ego rising, of ego-motivated action and thought. And then that is sort of a self-involved action, see? Caught up a bit in yourself. And it's a very fine line, and that's what this question is getting at. So apparently Richard used an analogy of the scientist who is non-attached to his or her hypothesis. That resonated with the questioner here, because you've just started a PhD. Congratulations, almost. So you're starting, and I'm at the tail end after 8 years. So when it comes to passion-driven action, thought, and how this translates into our chosen worldly, spiritual and intellectual pursuits in life, where, according to yoga philosophy, does the ego sit? When we are driven to do, think, be by passion. So you're passionate about really passionate about your PhD topic. What's the nature of this passion? Is it your ego at play? I did want to address this question, and you could say a lot of it I touched on, without directly answering in the opening part of this session. Something that made sense to me probably around 20 years ago when I first read it, from Vivekananda, and he was actually discussing this, that in his youth he assumed that if you really wanted to do things, get things done, you had to be passionate, drive, passion, and we hear that in modern culture. But then his realization and experience, and this is what has happened to me, is that because the passion is tied into what you're asking, the sort of ego association, right? The desire for something to come out of it, you see? Even if you say, no, I'm just really into this. So when it translates into this needs to be done, this I must do, this is my path, then it's not driven by passion, but you can have the same, if not even more energy than that passion you're describing, see? So what I'd advise is, because if you're going into PhD, you're going to go through very difficult times, and I speak from experience, and you're going to have ups and downs, and you're going to be doing things that maybe aren't directly related to it, don't satisfy it. You're going to come up against the blockages, problems, things that don't pan out. And passion is not enough. clarity why you are doing this, which is basically what you need to apply to yoga practice. I meet people in their first 3 to 5 years of practice, and they're always passionate or into it and so on. It's great. But I wait to see who's around after 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, because then it's not about passion. Tuareg puts it nicely, sincerity. Sincerity is key, because it's devoid of ego. Seriousness is full of ego. Sincerity has no ego. Sincerity can see things, it can be light, it can even be humorous, funny, and but it genuinely, it's like a force inside of you that's not dependent on passion. It's a force inside of you that will see it through. That's huge. It'll see it through, and passion is not rich enough to see it really through. Sincerity is rich enough to see it through, and with you remain sincere because you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it and the value of it. There are reasons why you jump in and get into something, and you probably make it through the other end, but all this up and down, and then, I've seen many people do PhDs and then question why did they do it and what it's about, and okay, I have that, but I'll get a different job or something, see? And for me, it's probably, the idea of it was in my head for 20 years from now, so at least 10 years before even getting around to it, and but the circumstances, which I didn't force, didn't come together till I was clear about, this is what makes sense, this is what it's not even what I need to do, it's sort of like I have no choice, I must do. And that's how I view the duties of life, to avoid them and to go and get peaceful and calm is non-sincere, regardless of where your passion is at, see? So I make time to have spacious, quiet practice, but the rest of the day is part of my practice because I'm getting done what has to be done. And what will keep you balanced through that, getting it done, is your understanding, interest in it, sincerity, way above pure passion. And I've conducted quite a large amount of empirical research, and there has to be hypotheses. And the problem with the research around yoga, meditation, mindfulness, all these things is there was a bit of, we know it's good for us, so the validational aspect. But the thing is, no, absolutely not. If I'm doing research, well, ideally it helps explain in greater understanding, which is good for us all, of how things work out, come together, function, etc., or experienced by different groups of people. Because, definitely in spirituality, yoga, meditation, there's no one-fits-all approach, which has been propagated by certain systems and yoga groups and meditation groups. It's impossible. There's no one-size-fits-all. There's ultimately one experience. There's ultimately an inner state. But we're all at different stages of development, karmic load before that, and therefore have to approach things at different times with different tools and materials. And therefore we start to understand these practices, techniques, exactly, birds and so on, tools, we start to understand them in greater detail for different people at different times. It's beautiful, it's wonderful, that's helpful. And given that alone, you can't expect, it had this outcome. But that's usually what we report and say and publish. So, I'll be a victim of that too. I'll state that for the record. But the point is, like for some of the things I've done, there is no good outcome. There is no positive result. But it was all this yoga practice, and we measured it this way and that way, and then some of it I'll be saying, yeah, well, it didn't differ from this or this or this, and why? Well, here's some reasons why, you see. And am I disappointed? Was I passionate about it? passion wasn't enough. Slow, sincere clarity to keep at it, stay in it, put it together, state down your hypotheses, leave them alone, continue with the execution. That's like being in the moment now, continue with what I have to do now, you see? And as human beings, we're going to have thoughts of the future, reflect a bit on the past, okay? But of course they can lead you and pull you away, and then that's this self-identification, this ego aspect that's pulling you way out. So come back. See what you have to do. Ideally understand what you're doing, why, and so on. Come back. And then sincerity trumps passion any day. And that's really what the text is saying. So when it talks of abhyasa vairagya, it is repeated, regular practices done with a sense of deep awareness, non-dependent, sincere. The outsider might see some passion, spark, lightness, but for you it's much richer than that. Okay, well I hope that is helpful, and I will stop there. There are other questions, but I'll get into them on the next time. And thank you for listening to this. I will say goodbye from peace, full and calm, a sincere Samahita, okay?